Got it. Hello, everyone. Are we live?
Yes.
Yes, we're live. My name is Lisa Black, and I am one of the Rogue Women writers. We're a group of 6 thriller writers whose backgrounds range from intelligence officer to journalism to psychotherapist to White House strategists. To let you know how this is going to go for you participants in the Zoom room, you'll be in the gallery during the reading. We encourage you to introduce yourself by typing your name in the chat bar. For those of you joining us on Facebook Live, please comment if you have anything you'd like to tell the authors, and especially if you have a question you'd like to ask. The authors will be reading only briefly, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. All of the books discussed here tonight should be available through your local bookstore. Let's all use the hashtags Rogue Reads and Rogue Women Writers as we post about our experiences with these authors and their works. As I said, my name is Lisa Black, and I'm the author of 15 novels featuring forensic specialists, which also happens to be my day job. I am based here in Florida, working with my local police department, and I'm thrilled to be emceeing this event. Now, in no particular order, we're going to introduce our 4 authors, then come back to each for their reading and discussion of their latest book. At the end, we'll do some round robin questions. If you have any questions for them, please post them at any time. Comments and questions will be monitored and relayed to the authors in real time. So let's get to it. Edgar and Seamus Award winner Alison Gaylin is a former journalist who covered the arts and entertainment beat for 15 years and lives in New York with her husband and daughter. In The Collective, a grieving mother desperate for revenge finds a like-minded group on the dark web and gets a lot more than she bargained for. Now, this is one of my favorite plots, vengeance by a group of very angry women. The grieving mother, Camille, must find if the executions doled out are only virtual, and if not, how far is she willing to go to get justice for her daughter? Camille is pretty ascetic, so she has no favorite snacks or drinks, but Alison drinks añejo tequila, neat, paired with salt and vinegar potato chips. I bought those for a prop, but I promised my husband he could have them when we were done.
I wish you could pour me some of that right now.
But first, a question about your series character, Brenna Spector, who has what most people would call a photographic memory. Have you ever actually met anyone who had hyperthymestic syndrome?
Weirdly, there's supposed to be only 12 people in the world that have been, technically diagnosed with it. But I have actually met 2 people at readings who told me that they've had it. So maybe there's 14 or, or they participated in the study. It seemed like hyperthymesia just seemed like such a fascinating thing to write about. It's sort of the opposite of me because I would forget my head if it wasn't screwed onto my neck. So it was kind of an interesting, if exhausting thing to explore in writing. But I've met a couple of people, but it was after the first book published. Yeah.
Very interesting. I always say if I could remember 5% of what I've learned over the years, I'd be brilliant.
Oh, yeah. Me too. If I ever learned it to begin with.
Okay, our next author, Isabella Maldonado, spent over 2 decades as a police officer, most recently as a captain in charge of special investigations and forensics. She then retired to Phoenix, where she lives with her young son and the rest of her family, and occasionally contributes her expertise to that city's Channel 12 news. The first book in her FBI thriller series, The Cipher, was optioned by Netflix for a film starring Jennifer Lopez. In her new book, A Different Dawn, the brutal murder of a family seems uncomfortably familiar to a triple homicide that occurred 4 years earlier and quite far away. Worse yet, the crime scenes echo FBI agent Nina Guerrera's vulnerable childhood. While not writing, Isabella likes to kick back with a prickly pear margarita and tells us the prickly pear cactus grows wild all over Arizona. So let me ask you this, because people ask me this all the time. Since you were in charge of forensics, what do you think is the biggest public misconception about forensic evidence?
Well, it's hard to narrow it down to one biggest thing. And by the way, I love that you're enjoying that prickly pear margarita. That's awesome. It's hard to narrow it down to one thing because, as you know, there's so many. But a few that stand out is one is the rapidity of results. Although they are getting faster and faster, and now they even have some field testing stuff, but they think that it can happen instantly and it can identify someone instantly. For example, if there's like blood at a scene or something like that, people believe that you can just put the blood sample in the bat computer, push a button, and it will spit out the name of whoever the blood belonged to. It's hilarious, but no, that is not the way it works. And there have been so many times, and obviously this better than anyone, where you have DNA samples that are just sitting in evidence and sitting in storage for years and years, waiting for a potential match. And so that's one thing. And probably another big misconception is that people think that if you suspect someone, or let's say that a murder occurs or something, and it happens in an office, that you can just go in there and just demand that everybody cough up their, do a swab and give you all their DNA, immediately, and demand it, and then they do it. It's not the way it works. There's a search warrant. You have to get a search warrant, and you have to write the affidavit. You have to get a judge to sign it, and all these other things have to happen. And the bar is pretty high for collecting people's DNA against their will. So those are probably a couple of the major things, I think.
That is so funny, because I use that same term all the time. It's like, we don't have a bat computer. We can't pour in the alphabet soup and have it, spell out a message for us. It does not work like that. Okay, our third author, the prolific and multiple award-winning Catriona MacPherson, grew up in Scotland but moved to California in 2010. And after 8 years in the new country, she also kicked off the comic Last Ditch Motel series, which takes a wry but affectionate look at California life from a Scottish perspective. Her new book belongs to her historical series, though, set in the old country in the 1930s. You can't trust your eyes when you're watching The Mirror Dance, because in this 15th book in the series, aristocratic sleuth Dandy Gilver finds that the murder of a Punch and Judy puppeteer connects to her investigation of plagiarism, the theater, and academia. When Dandy takes a break, she feasts on fish and chips served in newspaper. And having eaten fish and chips in Australia, I can tell you they're not kidding about the newspaper. And fish and chips were like a little beyond my abilities tonight.
I was wondering. Oh, you've got the tea. Okay.
Yes.
That's important too. Yeah.
I
was thinking,
a lot of tea.
Wow, you're going to have battered haddock and chips and newspaper to hold up. No.
Well, I've been to Scotland and absolutely loved it, especially Edinburgh. But why the move to California? What made you decide to move?
The usual reason, boy trouble. Husband's job. What are you going to do? I mean, we made a deal. I was an academic. He is an academic. He's a scientist. He's an epidemiologist. He's been working at home since March 2020. So we were both academics, and I wanted to pack it in and write full time. So that was my side of the deal. And his side of the deal was, we're then more mobile and we can go somewhere else. And we did. Here we are. So, which is fine, because I can do my work anywhere, and California's not too, if you can't live at home, California's not too shabby, right? So it's worked out pretty well.
That is good. Yeah. Good. I'm glad you're enjoying our country.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Our last author, debut author Hannah Morrissey's education began in a 2-room schoolhouse and concluded at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she earned her BA in English with an emphasis in creative writing. Between roles of bookseller and copywriter, she spent 3.5 years transcribing police reports and contemplating her novel, Hello, Transcriber. She lives with her police lieutenant husband, 2 pugs who sleep beside her while she writes, and a to-be-read pile that never seems to get any smaller. In Hello, Transcriber, aspiring author and police transcriber Hazel Greenlee joins their lead detective in exploring the death of a 9-year-old overdose victim. Hazel will learn just how far she'll go for a good story, even if it means destroying her marriage and luring the killer to her as she plunges deeper into the city she's desperate to escape. Hazel loves strawberries because they're fresh and bright and they don't remind her anything of the city she's in. And a caramel macchiato. I don't even know how to pronounce that. And to make one was definitely beyond my ability, so I didn't even attempt that. I just got the strawberry. So, but first I have to ask, how did you become a police transcriber? That's a rather unusual occupation.
Yeah, it was weird. I just fell into it. Like, yeah, I quit my job at a bookstore and I was just looking for jobs and it popped up online. I think it was called like Typist 2. And I'm like, well, I can type. So yeah, basically I just took a typing test and I took a transcribing test. I didn't even know what it was. I got 100% and they were like, you're hired.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Now we're going to go back to Alison and hear more about her new book and have her read a section for us. Oh, Alison, you're on mute.
That doesn't help. I'm going to read the section of this book on mute. So great. Well, I'm excited to be, I'm not, I'll do my best at reading. I'm not the, wonderful audio reader, but the collective centers around a woman named Camille Gardner, who experienced a terrible tragedy in her life and meets a group of like-minded women online. But I'm just going to read the beginning of the book. So I don't think I really need to do too much of a setup. And I'm always afraid of revealing too much of the plot because I don't want to give spoilers, which I inevitably almost always do. So anyway, this is the first few pages of the book. Mm-hmm. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. I'm climbing out of the subway tunnel, 1,000 unwanted smells in my hair. I'm not used to being around this many people, the stink of them, the heat, the noise especially. I just shared a subway car with a group of high school girls and their laughter still swirls in my ears. I probably should have driven, but it's been hard for me to drive long distances since Emily's death. My thoughts start spinning along with the wheels, memories of road trips, of carpools and radio sing-alongs and petty arguments. And before I know it, I'm aiming straight for the divider. The venue is just 3 blocks away. I walk slowly, slower than everyone around me, trying to catch my breath, to still my thoughts, to think of nothing but the sidewalk and the cold night air and where I need to be. From half a block away, I recognize the Braeburn Club. I know it from the photo I found online. It's located in a Gramercy Park brownstone with leaded windows and wide, majestic steps. It's a week past New Year's, but the Braeburn Club is still decorated for the holiday season, a lush wreath filling the front door, icicle lights dripping from the windowsills like fresh beads of sweat. I pass a group of young women smoking last-minute cigarettes, friends of his maybe, and I think back to the time I caught Emily smoking weed with her friend Fiona. She must have been 14, always a little old for her years and bored of our small Hudson Valley town. I got so angry with her, grounded her for 2 months. Her dad thought it excessive. We smoked pot when we were that age, Matt said, missing the point. Yes, we smoked pot when we were 14, but Emily wasn't us. She was better than us. I won't do it again, Mom, I promise. Her voice in my head is as clear and real as the shrieking laughter of the girls on the train. I want to lose myself in it and never come back. It isn't until I'm at the top of the stairs, after I've handed the boy at the door my invitation and I'm in line for the coat check, that Emily's voice quiets and I remember where I am and why I'm here. Anything else, ma'am? Says the coat check girl. She has a freshly scrubbed look and shiny dark hair, and she's wearing the Braeburn College colors, crimson jacket, gold blouse. Anything else? She says it like she's prompting me from a script. No, nothing else, thank you. The girl's nose scrunches up. She looks at me funny, and I wonder if she can sense what I've been up to, who I am. The evening's main event is the first alumni dinner of the year. It will be held in the formal dining room, a 4-course meal capped off by a speech by a noted software developer from the class of '98. But I won't be staying here for any of that. They're holding the ceremony first in the club's library, a sprawling room with wall-sized bookshelves and grand arched ceilings painted with exotic birds and flowers. It smells of leather bindings and polished floors, and there's a Christmas tree in the corner, decorated entirely in Braeburn colors. I imagine most people are calmed by this place, a respite from the stench and bellow of the city. I relax my shoulders and try my best to act as though I feel the same. The seats are all filled by the time I'm in the room. A boy in a tuxedo offers me a glass of champagne from a tray. I take it for the sake of having something to hold and slip in next to a group at the back waiting. There's a man watching me. That used to happen all the time, and I used to find it flattering, but I don't like it now. I've lost 28 pounds since Emily's death. I've stopped coloring my hair and wearing makeup, and I had the bolt-ons removed. And so I'm literally no longer the woman I once was. There was no reason to watch me, no flattering reason anyway. The man is around my age with a thinning buzz cut, his jacket and tie cheap for the room. He smiles and I turn away from him, the stem of the champagne glass tight between my fingers. Why are you here? He says, and I think, does he recognize me? I'm hoping my thoughts don't show on my face. Excuse me? His smile is surprisingly warm, disarming. Are you a relative? No. Braver in a love? Yes, the easier lie. How about you? He says nothing, just nods as though he doesn't believe me. Then he turns back around. Strange. But then everything is strange here, like a dream or maybe an acid trip. The color's too soft, the whisper's too loud. I'm feeling a little nauseous. There are other people looking at me, two silver-haired women in the back row. Is my hair okay? Do I have something stuck to my shoe? I almost asked him that, but I stopped myself just in time. There's a podium at the front of the room and a man pads up to it. He has thin lips, wispy hair, narrow shoulders, everything about him meager and unobtrusive. His name is Richard Waverly, and he's the Dean of the School of Humanities. He introduces himself as such, and I already know those things. I take a big swallow of champagne and then another, and then the glass is done when I hadn't even intended to sip. The room shimmers and blurs. The silver-haired women whisper like snakes. Waverly says, the recipient of the Martha L. Koch Humanitarian Award this year is a young man who exemplifies public service. And that's when I finally catch sight of him, standing in the rear corner of the room, his golden curls slicked down, his parents sentries on either side of him. I'd recognize them anywhere. The father is square-jawed and straight-backed, the mother blonde and beaming. He's quite a bit taller now, the son. Apparently he had some growing to do, but the parents haven't changed a bit. The mother especially, in her seasonal wrap dress, big diamond at her throat. Her death didn't change you. I say it out loud. Her death didn't change you. The hissing women whip their heads around in unison. I can feel the heat of their glares. I aim my eyes at the empty glass and take a deep breath, but then Waverly says the boy's name, a punch to my throat, Harris Blanchard. He strides up to the podium, taller Harris with his slicked down curls, with his expensive suit and shiny shoes, and I hear Emily's voice again. His name is Harris, Mom. He's really nice. I remember her Instagram too, Emily's motto from an Instagram account I'd only learned of after her death. Her words on the lips of a defense lawyer as expensive as the gray suit Harris Blanchard is wearing to accept his Martha L. Koch Award. My daughter's Instagram bio, the defense lawyer's sneer. No fucks left to give. What does that mean to you, Mrs. Gardner? Harris Blanchard pulls a piece of paper out of his pocket and unfolds it. My gaze pings on his mother just as she mouths, I love you, sweetie, and I have no fucks left to give. The word bubbles up in my throat and escapes a shriek. Murderer. I start towards Harris Blanchard. I don't get far.
That sounds absolutely fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
I definitely want to hear the rest of that story.
Thanks.
So when I launched the Gardner and Renner series, in which my protagonist is a vigilante, I worried that readers would be offended by the idea of him getting away with killing bad guys. But for the most part, that didn't happen. Did you worry about how taking justice into their own hands idea would be received?
Well, I'm very gray on the idea of it in the book, I think, as you'll see. I mean, what I really try to do is just explore that idea of taking justice into your own hands. It's by no means an endorsement of vigilantism. I think the main point of it is that there's a very thin line between justice and vigilantism. And how do you know that you're the person that knows right from wrong? I mean, that's a lot of what I explore in the book. So I wasn't really that necessarily concerned about how readers might take it. I just hope that they would sort of understand the kind of the struggle that was going on within me when I wrote it, that they might sort of appreciate that and appreciate those ideas.
And your books usually explore the effect that social media has in our lives. And Camille at first is not sure if she should take the collective's plans as real or, cathartic fantasies. And we're all in that book when it comes to social media, what's real, what's not, what should we trust when the consequences can be devastating. So what are your basic rules about working with social media?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think it's fascinating. And it's like one of those things that sort of, as divided as we all are as people, it's one of the things that most readers can relate to, is that we're all sort of tied into social media. And particularly during the pandemic, it just became this thing where, everything outrage, it's like instant outrage, instant, this, instant that. And you feel like you're getting the whole story in 2 minutes when you read it online. And you're normally on with a bunch of like-minded friends, and a lot of people sort of ask me what I was trying to say with the book, what the main themes are. And I always say, there's a thin line between justice and vigilantism. That's one of them. And the other one is beware of like-minded people that you meet online. So we all have that. We all have our little message threads where we talk about things, or, where we'll, maybe get a little bit nasty when we're all gossiping or whatever, but imagine that times 1,000. It's quite possible. And Catriona asked what a bolt-on is. I noticed in the chat. That's just the slang for fake boobs. So implants, breast implants.
Oh. Okay.
So, yeah, bolt-on.
I was not aware of that either. I was wondering the same thing.
Well, there you go. So
okay. So in your career as an arts journalist, what is the wildest event, the craziest media firestorm you covered?
Oh boy. Well, when I first started, before I went to graduate school, I was a reporter for The Star, the tabloid. And back then it wasn't anywhere near as classy and glossy as it is now. So that was, when I was in my early 20s, and I did a lot of, I crashed David Hasselhoff's wedding. That's probably the kind of craziest story that I have. And it was ridiculous because there were only like 30 people invited to this wedding of David Hasselhoff and this other reporter who was around my age. We were both at the time, I don't know, early 20s. We went in and they asked us which side we were on, and we're like, oh, we're on the groom side, no problem. We're just like these people that nobody knew just coming in there. And of course we got thrown out and humiliated in front of everyone. So that's probably the most ridiculous thing I've done. Although I, done a lot of ridiculous things in my life, but that probably takes the cake.
Sounds very fun though.
It was at the time, definitely.
I was in Mondsee, Germany, and with a tour group with my two sisters, and we're going to see the church where they filmed the wedding scene in The Sound of Music. And we're walking up this little path to this church in this little tiny town. And there's like a sandwich board saying, tonight, this event tonight, it's a Baywatch party. And this was just, this was like 5 years ago.
Right.
You're having a Baywatch party. So yes,
it's an enduring.
David Hasselhoff is known, globally.
Yes, exactly. It was very thrilling seeing him in person, even if I was thrown out of his wedding.
Okay, so let's now hear from Isabella, and I want to hear about your new book.
Okay, my new book is A Different Dawn. That is the sequel to The Cipher, and so this just came out in August. And so I think a lot of people at the end of The Cipher wanted to know, where on earth can this book go next, or this story go next. So what I was going to do is I was going to read the first couple chapters, because my chapters are super short. They're just like a couple pages. I mean, they're real quick. So the first one starts off with Nina Guerrera's background, and then the second one goes straight into a grisly crime scene. So, you get a little bit of everything here. Okay, so with chapter 1, 20 years ago, the Russell House Group Home for Girls, Fairfax County, Virginia. 7-year-old Nina sat cross-legged on the floor with the others, breathless with anticipation. Every girl at the home envied Angelica, who was spending her final night at the Russell House. Angelica had been chosen. 11 years old and willowy, with long coltish legs and skin fair enough to pass for white, Angelica had spent the past 3 months with a foster family who had decided to petition the court for adoption. The process would take many more months, but she would continue to live with her future family in the meantime. Today, Angelica had come back to the Russell House to say goodbye to her friends, or bask in her superiority, depending on how she felt about you. According to Miss Brown, almost no one was adopted past the age of 10, yet Angelica had managed to defy the odds. She had been placed in foster care only 6 months ago, unlike Nina, who had never known her family. Nina privately wondered if prospective adoptive parents were told how long each child had been in the system. She pictured her photograph in a police-style mug book, the tag beneath her with the word "lifer" in bright red. On the other hand, maybe she could make a better effort next time she was placed in a foster home. Why did she have to be so curious, ask so many questions, poke around in things that weren't her business? If she'd known the teacher would call the police, she would never have brought the items in the shoebox her foster father stashed under his bed to school for show and tell. As Nina and the other girls sat in a semicircle around her, Angelica leaned forward in her chair, her words taking on a spooky tone. This is the legend of La Llorona, the wailing woman. Little Samantha, who was only 5 years old, scooted closer to Nina. The girl's hazel eyes were already wide with fear, and Nina handed over her favorite plushie, a soft cheetah named Princesa, the only thing Nina could call her own. Samantha clutched the spotted toy cat in trembling hands as Angelica told the story. There once was a woman named Maria. She married a handsome man and had 2 children, but her husband loved their children more than her. One day, Maria caught her husband kissing another woman and realized he loved the other woman more as well. Another little girl, Caitlin, edged up to Nina's other side. Caitlin had what the social workers called special needs. To Nina's way of thinking, the only thing special Caitlin needed was protection from bullies. Nina thought Caitlin was super smart, even though some of the older girls like Angelica called her stupid. They teased Caitlin because she wasn't good at speaking. She stuttered and had trouble talking to the other kids, but she could add a long column of numbers in her head, knew how many jelly beans were in a jar without counting them, and had begun to study algebra last month when she turned 6. When Angelica arrived for her final visit earlier this evening, she had hidden Caitlin's new math book. Nina had snatched the brand new cell phone Angelica's adoptive parents had given her, holding it over the toilet until she returned the stolen textbook to Caitlin. Nina draped an arm around Caitlin's small shoulders, comforting her as they listened to the rest of the tale. Maria grew angry, Angelica said, and a bit loca. She vowed to make her husband pay for cheating on her. To punish him, she drowned their children in the river. When she went home, her husband asked where the kids were, and she admitted she had killed them. Her husband got real mad at her. Told her he would never be with her again until she found their children. Caitlin began rocking back and forth. Angelica's voice dropped to a stage whisper. Maria, sorry over what she had done and missing her lost children, drowned herself in the same river. Samantha squeezed the tough stuffed cheetah harder. Now she is doomed to walk the earth as a ghost, Angelica continued, forever searching for her dead niños. She wears a white gown and a flowing veil. If she finds children wandering at night, she kidnaps them and drowns them in the river. She is called La Llorona because she is always weeping. If you hear her, you will be the next to die. An eerie voice called out from behind them, ¿Dónde están mis hijos? One of the older girls had hidden in the back of the room to scare the little ones. Samantha screamed, threw Princessa in the air, and raced to the bedroom. Caitlin flung herself into Nina's lap, her slender arms circling Nina's neck. Nina felt warmth spreading onto her jeans and realized Caitlin had peed herself. Angelica scooped up the discarded plushie, a sly grin on her lips. What's this? Her voice took on a sing-song quality. Is this Widow Nina's widow baby toy? Nina gently set Caitlin aside and stood. Give it back. Angelica pointed at Nina and shrieked with laughter. Look, everyone, Nina wet her pants. Nina looked down. Sure enough, Caitlin's pee had dripped into her lap. She shifted her gaze to Caitlin, whose small frame shook with terror as she clutched Nina's leg. She could have pointed out to everyone that it was Caitlin who had peed. She knew what it meant to show weakness in the group home, which is why she held her tongue. She could handle the abuse better than Caitlin. She certainly had enough practice. Angelica lifted up the stuffed cheetah for all to see. I think widow baby Nina needs to grow up. She grasped its head and began to twist hard. Nina took a step toward her. Stop it. Caitlin's death grip on her leg prevented her from going any farther. Angelica looked around the room, playing to her audience. I'll never have to see any of you losers after tonight, but before I go, I'm going to give you all something to remember. She ripped the head off the cheetah and began yanking the stuffing out, flinging it all around her in a white cloud of polyester fluff. Her eyes narrowed on Nina. Unlike the rest of us, nobody ever wanted you. We at least had a family at some point. Your parents threw you in a dumpster like trash. Her voice took on the same sing-song quality it had before. Dumpster baby, dumpster baby, dumpster. One moment Nina was standing while Caitlin clutched her leg. The next thing she knew, the staff at the group home had rushed in from the kitchen to tug her off Angelica, whose nose bled freely under Nina's flailing fists. If there had ever been the slightest hope Nina might be adopted, it had ended that night, the night of La Llorona. You know what, I think maybe I'll just stop there. So that's a little background on Nina, and then the rest of it we skip forward to present day, but it gives you an idea of who she is. So.
And that's a wonderful introduction. I am totally in Nina's corner now, and I'm really glad she bloodied Angelica's nose. So what made you decide to use the La Llorona legend in your story?
Well, it's a creepy Latin folk tale, and it kind of it blends into the story that I'm telling in the book. It's an FBI hunting a serial killer. That's what the Nina Guerrera series is. Nina Guerrera is now, she's all grown. She's an FBI agent. Mm-hmm. And so she's working sort of in tandem with the BAU, and they're doing all that, kind of psychological profiling stuff. And in this particular case, they have a killer who strikes every 4 years on Leap Day. And so it's a really unusual profile. No one's ever seen it before, but the way that he stages his crime scenes is kind of reminiscent of La Llorona. And so as a matter of fact, the first case that he ever did 28 years earlier was known as the Llorona case. So.
Oh, okay. I love horror movies, so I have to ask, what did you think of the movie?
I purposely didn't
see it.
Yeah, I purposely didn't watch it. I try not to, to let stuff like that get inside my head. I have no idea. But again, this isn't horror. This is like totally, right. It's a crime. Oh, yeah. It's a police procedural is what it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it doesn't really have, I start off with that, but it really doesn't have elements of like, there's nothing supernatural going on. It's strictly, crazy lunatic serial killer person, nothing supernatural. Yeah.
And you said you were unprepared for the heat when you moved to Phoenix, but where did you move from and why Phoenix?
Okay. Yeah, actually, I grew up and lived in the DC area. Actually, the first chapter is set in Fairfax County, Virginia, and that's where I was born and raised. And that's where I did all of my law enforcement, is like in the suburbs of DC. And so as a matter of fact, the Beltway sniper case was, I drew some of my inspiration for the first book in the series, The Cipher, from the Beltway sniper case. So which my department had one of those cases. You know, he had several around the DC area. So that is where I came from. So, you know, I'm used to having 4 distinct seasons.
Yes.
You know, and everything,
Yeah.
come out to here. And of course, it was kind of funny, you know, Catriona mentioned Boy Trouble, I think, where, you know, talking about moving or whatever. It was something similar here. It was that I fell in love with someone from Phoenix. So that's how I ended up in Phoenix. So, and as a matter of fact, we met at the FBI Academy. So it's in Quantico. So it's kind of fun. So yeah.
Yeah, Chris put in the chat that you have a police background, which we went over. Can you just briefly give us your police resume again?
Sure. I've tried to condense it down. So I was on the Fairfax County Police Department for a little over 22 years. And so went up through the ranks and had lots of different positions. I was a hostage negotiator. I was the department spokesperson. As a matter of fact, I was the spokesperson during the sniper investigation, Beltway sniper thing. And then I also was a precinct commander. So the last position that I had when I retired was commander of special investigations and forensics. So that included all those different kind of assignments that are in forensics. So, you know, the fingerprint and, you know, just everything that's involved with that. And then as part of it, when I was a captain, the FBI has an academy that they put on for senior law enforcement executives from around the world. And so you go there and you live on site in their FBI Academy for 3 months, and you go there and you live there, and you know, you get access to each other and to all the best that the FBI has to offer. And I just really got into all of that. As a matter of fact, one of the courses that I took at that time was taught by some of the BAU members. And, you know, so I took a whole course on serial killers, and I got to see, because I'm law enforcement and the training was for law enforcement, I got to see all of the firsthand information. I mean, they just opened up the case file. So I saw all the crime scene photos, listened to the interrogations and interviews, heard from the ones who did it, you know, how they investigated it, how they tracked it down, how they caught it. And as I was there, I was thinking, you know, people would be fascinated to hear how they really go about catching these people. And so I knew that I've written 2 series. One features a homicide detective, a police detective, but the other one features, you know, the FBI. And I thought, you know, it's great to be able to bring this to people, because if the public, I think if they truly understood how incredibly dedicated these people are and how hard they work to try to, you know, bring these people to justice and to stop these horrible crimes, I think they would feel a lot better about everything that goes on. So that's how I ended up doing that.
Okay. And we could talk all night about that, but unfortunately we need, you know, we have a limited amount of time here. So I'm gonna move on.
Yes.
And I want to hear about Catriona's new book and have her read a bit from that.
I am tempted to say I yield my time to the woman from Phoenix, but I won't do that. I won't do that. Yeah. So you said I write comedies about a displaced Scot in California. I also write sort of psychological suspense thrillers. I call the subgenre "Where's she off to now?" because there's very often a woman on the jacket running away. But my first love was the British Golden Age, and I've written 15 now, of what I call preposterous detective stories. So the Mirror Dance, I'll translate it into American. The Mirror Dance is number 15. Fabulous quote. I should have written that quote into my contract. And years ago, I can't remember which of the 14 previous books this was, but there was a newspaper review that said lots of nice things, but also said that the plot was just this side of ludicrous, to which my response was, challenge accepted. So I've been trying since then to check whether there was just a little bit of room this side of ludicrous. And now I've rocked up with a Punch and Judy show, which I was going to say was inappropriate entertainment for children. But after hearing about La Llorona, it's not as bad as that. So I don't know how familiar people in the US are with the Punch and Judy shows. It's a traditional sort of summer seaside and maybe Christmas party puppet show. So a tall kiosk that one man stands in. He's known as the Professor, and he's got hand puppets, Punchinello. So it's from the Commedia dell'arte. Punchinello, Mr. Punch, and his wife Judy, who he beats up, their baby, who he kills. And you're right. And children licking ice lollies and going, ha ha ha, this is so funny. And then obviously an alligator and a dachshund and a policeman and some sausages, and also Scaramouche, who's my favorite, who's a completely silent puppet dressed in black, who comes on, and all that happens is his neck grows and grows and grows and grows until his head disappears into the top of the puppet theatre. And that's all that happens. And no one really knows who he is. He might be the devil or God or justice or who knows. Anyway, so I wanted to write a locked room mystery. I'd never done that, and thought a good way to have this happen would be to have a ring of deck chairs and people watching the kiosk, watching a Punch and Judy show, and Scaramouche comes on and his neck grows, and then everything stops and everyone waits and it gets awkward. And then my detective, Dandy Gilver, and her sidekick, her Watson, Alec Osborne, untie the back of the tent. And there's the Professor, the puppeteer, with his throat slit from ear to ear, no weapon in sight, and no way for a murderer to have arrived or left, because everyone's watching the tent, which is plonked in the middle of empty grass. So that's the preposterous plot. That's the plot, just this side of ludicrous this time. And so it's about Punch and Judy show. It's about a publisher of wholesome women's magazines and girls' comics. It's a little bit set in the University of St Andrews. And it's also set somewhat in the backstage areas of some variety theatres where the Professor, the puppeteer, stores his stuff in between shows. And because this is Rogue Women, I've picked a moment of sisterhood to read today, set at the stage door of Her Majesty's Theatre in Dundee, where Dandy and Alec have come just after the murder. The door was opening and I fastened my attention on what it would reveal. "Good morning," Alec began, long before the person inside revealed herself, as it transpired. "I'm not buying," the doorkeeper said. She was a monumental figure, at least 6 feet tall and broad through the middle, although her shoulders sloped with age. Her legs, sticking out under a shapeless skirt, were swollen and visibly red even through thick stockings, and her feet were jammed into a pair of broken-down tartan carpet slippers, one of which had lost its pom-pom. All in all, she looked as though she were slowly melting and would one day soon become a puddle of herself around her former feet. "I'm not Alec began. "Whatever it is," the woman went on, "I've never bought so much as a clothes peg at this store, and I've never passed on a message to a chorus girl either, so you can put that right out of your nasty mind. No more have I ever spoken to the producer to get an audition for the likes of you, not even for ready money." She fixed Alec with a stare. Above the collapse of her body, her head was still quite impressive. Her hair was rusty red, perhaps a choice informed by reality in her youth, but quite outlandish these days, as she passed into old age. Her brows were drawn on in haughty arcs of the same shade, and she had large gold hoops hanging from her ears, years of such things having dragged her lobes downwards. For all that, her cheekbones were sharp and expertly painted, and her mouth, currently pursed in disapproval, had a bow above and a warm curve below. Her eyes flashed at Alec, and their light managed to shine beyond the forest of black lashes and the ring of coal pencil, until she narrowed them again when they were utterly invisible in all that darkness. "Well, thank you for the reassessment," Alec said. "From peg seller to swain to budding thespian. Have you ever waved in a backer? What makes you think I'm not here to invest in a show?" "Radio," said the woman. "No one with an ounce of sense is sticking his money on variety these days, are they? You'd be putting your purse on a radio show, or the talkies." "Well, thank you," said Alec. "An ounce of sense? Thank you kindly." The woman made a gesture so close to spitting as to make no odds and gave up on Alec, turning instead to me. Is it yours? She said. Did you marry it? There's a slip I've never made anyway. I could not help but laugh. I did not marry it, I said, although I've got a specimen at home I'd like to hear your review of. I went into business with this one, actually. We're private detectives, and we're currently looking for the last known whereabouts of a chap called Albert Mackey. We were told you might be able to help. The professor, the woman said, yesterday I'd have said one thing, for he's been leaving his rig at the back here for an obligement, doing the same thing every time he passed through Dundee for donkeys. Set your clock by him. But he's skipped town early this summer. He never turned up last night. He didn't skip town, Alex said. He, once again, and thankfully this time, she interrupted him. Oh ho, she said. Had a better offer, has he? Well, there's gratitude for you. Years on end of me bending rules and giving him room for his messes, and he's gone off to greener pastures, has he? She was angry, but ire did not quite manage to cover the stew of other feelings. She was also hurt. Her red mouth trembled, and she sniffed richly. Can we come inside? I asked her. I had never seen anyone wearing more black muck round her eyes. If she started crying through it, her poor face would be a wreckage, and I hated to cause any woman, much less a fellow professional, to be brought quite that low in public. And we'll leave them there at the stage door. Although I just want to say one thing. I had forgotten about this when I chose that passage. I have had troubles with typos in the past. A typo that almost got through the page proofs was featured by my publisher in one of those little novelty books that they sell by the till as stocking stuffers at Christmas, because it was just filth. And this one, I almost did one in this book that was even worse. So it's the 1930s, and it's the Her Majesty's Theatre is a variety theatre, and they're putting on a show of the Arabian Nights. And back then they had live animals in shows. Thankfully, they don't do that anymore. But they had live animals in the Arabian Nights. And that led me to write the sentence, which almost was published, which goes like this. Her Majesty's back entrance stank of camel. I mean, I wouldn't be done for treason. Yeah, I know, but I just think, oh God, the poor wee queen, she doesn't need that. I saw it and thought, oh my God, I can't believe no one saw that. Slight double entendre. Anyway, I didn't. I rewrote it, but I think about it every time I read that scene. So that's them.
Well, you've created an entire world, like a cast of character, a history of Dandy Gilver's life. How do you keep that all straight when you're writing?
Oh God. Yeah, good question. Not this, but the other series was supposed to be a trilogy, but then I'm writing book 5 now. You know, what are you going to do? And I just realized today that I have no clue what someone's mother's called, what my heroine's mother's called. So it's not character Bibles. I did early on, I wrote for my website a floor plan. My dad did it actually, and he's an engineer. You could build this house from the blueprints. I did a floor plan, and I did a biography of all, you know, her and her family and the servants. So when they were the year of their birth, which is really handy because you can remember how old they are in each book now. Mm-hmm. So I used that. But yeah, a lot of feverish looking back through earlier novels and wishing that I'd written better notes, frankly. I sort of know it now. I'm 15 books in. I kind of know it now. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, they feel
I've
real.
done the same thing. I think I was in like my 4th book in the series and realized I didn't know exactly what color hair my heroine had, that, you know, I'd said exactly. And so I had to go back to like the first book and do a search, and I never said. So
yeah, I don't think I've made
her eyes, but not her hair.
I don't think I've made any massive mistakes. I decided quite early on to not, because I think, you know how the book you haven't written yet is just so perfect, and then writing the actual book as a series is slamming shut all the doors, and then you're stuck. So I decided that if I didn't need to know something, I wouldn't nail it down. So there's bits of her life that are quite fuzzy, in case, like her birth family, in case I ever need it for a story. So there's a lot of cover in that.
Good idea. So along with an intense amount of historical information on your website, you feature gorgeous and complicated recipes. Do you love to cook?
I do, yes, I do. And she has a cook because, she's aristocratic. And so we decided, a few books in, we thought, I think because I had put so much food in the books, like there's always fish and chips. She would never eat fish and chips out of newspaper in the street, but because I miss them so much, they do worm their way into the books. So there's always a lot of food in the books. And so I decided, just for fun, I mean, the recipes are things like tomato sandwiches, which is not a difficult recipe. And also the scone recipe, her cook times her scones by verses of Onward Christian Soldiers. They're not recipes that, they work, but they're not recipes as you would find them in actual cookery books. No way. But it's fun.
Well, as long as they work, that's
yeah,
all
they do work. They do work. I can't make scones, though. I'm really bad at making scones. They're a skill I don't have.
That's very fun. So now we're going to move on to our last author, our debut author, Hannah. And let's hear about her new book and have a reading from that.
Hey, so my book is called Hello Transcriber, and yes, largely inspired by my experience as a police transcriber. I did that for 3.5 years. It was wild fun. So it's just kind of about this character named Hazel, who she wants to be a writer, but she gets this job as a police transcriber and kind of finds herself inadvertently in the perfect, position as, sort of this fly on the wall to, like a fatal overdose investigations that's going on. So I just wanted to read, it's from the beginning of the book. It starts at, this is chapter 2. So kind of the beginning of the paragraph here, and then a break, just cutting out some conversation, moving to
Okay.
at the end. So there's a row of blue apartments across the street. They're almost lost to a barrel-colored sky. Their peaks trimmed with white are all that separate them. They look like the whitecaps on Lake Michigan, the kind that slam into the half-sunk pier and pull children and drunks under. The top left window is empty. A trash bag is taped over the hole, sucking in and out like a diaphragm. Even from where I sit, inside a narrow office easily 30 yards away, I can see the glass ground to powder on the sidewalk below, mixed with snow and salt and cocaine. Probably fentanyl too. Nothing cuts anything without it. Nobody cuts anything without it these days. Good job, security, for me. There are 4 front entrances, each marked with a crimson door. On the far left, beneath the broken window, someone wearing a gold hoodie sits slumped on the crumbling concrete steps. Drunk or stoned or dead, maybe. He doesn't seem to notice the black plastic bag that rolls by like a tumbleweed, the one I recognize as the kind my husband brings home after a visit to the corner store. It skips languidly over the salt-encrusted asphalt, wandering past black and white police SUVs that are parked while their windshields defrost. Finally, it floats out of view, probably to catch on a branch or a chain-link fence or the grill of an old Crown Vic. That was the first thing I noticed about Black Harbor when Tommy and I moved here, the bags. The scene outside my window is a still life I could get lost in all morning. That diaphanous plastic bag in the foreground, a row of apartments like dilapidated dollhouses in the middle, and in the background, Forge Bridge, half obscured by haze and lying like a predator in wait. But the reports won't type themselves, as Mona says. Pressing down on the foot pedal, I listen to the soft static that precedes a man's voice. Hello, transcriber. This is Investigator Rowe of the Black Harbor Police Department, payroll 7122, phoning in a supplemental report for a death investigation. Summary has been completed and names have been added to the form. What follows is the narrative. On January 15th, at approximately 0536 hours, I received a phone call from Lieutenant Mobeck of the Black Harbor Police Department advising me to respond to the area of Fulton Street and Forge Avenue for a report of a possible suicide, period. My fingertips fly over the keyboard like raindrops pattering frantically against a windshield. As I type, I envision Investigator Rowe, tall, dark-haired, 5 o'clock shadow, Benjamin Bratt type character. In a black wool coat, his breath a cloud in front of him and his polished dockers crunching on old snow as he walks down the slope of the riverbank to meet the corpse that's been pulled ashore. Based on medical examiner Winthorpe's examinations, the victim had been deceased for approximately 3 days, due to the color of the skin and the buoyancy of the body. The color of skin is something upon which I ruminate. Here, tucked away in the little terrarium-like office, I stare at the frost on the window. I examine it with intention, analyzing how I would write about it. thousands, if not millions of crystals blooming and fracturing to give the glass the illusion of being shattered. The pearlish hairs of a dandelion seed having blossomed into tiny ethereal umbrellas, frozen in mid-float, dendrites beneath a cold corpse's skin. Every fractal fits so perfectly together to create one single sheet of frost, so delicate a whisper could obliterate it. I've seen skin like that before. The memory is enough to make me rip my hands away from the keyboard. I curl my fingers. My knuckles glow white like the peaks of the apartment building as I will myself to stop remembering the way the wet, half-frozen soil felt pushed beneath my nails when I scrambled up the hillside. The window is thinly coated with aluminum. We can see out, but most of the time, especially because we're with the lights off, people on the other side cannot see in. It's like a two-way mirror, Mona had explained. It protects us from the public eye. You might have noticed we're not exactly in Mayberry here. And stops us from baking in the sun the 2 times a year it comes around. I resumed typing, listening to Rowe describe the deceased party as a white male, possibly in his 40s, approximately 6 feet, 250 pounds. Blurred bluish tattoos are visible on his forearms as he was just wearing jeans and a soiled white t-shirt. A pilled Forge Fuels embroidered pullover was discarded on the bridge, as well as the contents of his pockets. A wallet containing his identification and credit cards, a scratch-off ticket, and a suicide note. I didn't think it was high enough to kill yourself, I said the other day when Mona finished typing up a report similar to the one I'm working on now. The water's only 6 feet deep underneath, Fargo. Hitting the bottom is like hitting a fucking slab of cement. She's been calling me Fargo since Monday, when on my guided tour Liv, the pretty redhead from records department, suggested I sound like the characters from the eponymous movie. She'd even thrown in a few yaws, hays, and you betchas for her impression of me. Though for the record, I've never in all of my 26 years uttered a you betcha. It's how you say your O's, Liv explained matter-of-factly. Say boat. Boat, I said. And she and Mona both laughed at an accent I couldn't and still can't detect. It didn't help matters when I told them I come from a small town 3 hours north of here. And by small, I mean population less than 200. Now, staring at my reflection in the portal to my right, I mouth the word boat. Page break. I turn back to my computer to click on the next report in the queue, and a figure in the parking lot startles me. I jump, slamming my hand against my chest. What the? Mona sees him too. The man in the gold hoodie stands just 3 feet from our window. He looks about my age, with eyes that resemble a pair of waxing gibbous moons turned on their sides and sunken into the shadows of his sockets. His cheeks are blistered, though when I look more closely, I can see that the blisters are actually tears frozen to his skin. My blood turns cold, and I feel the color draining from my face to match Rose's description of the corpse pulled ashore. I know him. I've sat in a dark living room with him watching documentaries, while Tommy and old Will talked about guns and politics and cracked bottle caps off the edge of the kitchen table. He lives next door, Sam. His jaw hangs so slack, it makes me think something could crawl out of his mouth. I squint and lean toward the window, trying to hear the words his lips are forming. He's so close now, his breath fogs the glass. Dude, he's fucked up or something. Mona fumbles with the phone next to her portal. She dials the extension of the sergeant's office, but I'm concentrating too hard on what he's saying to listen to her conversation. I shake my head and point to my ear. I can't hear you, I say. He can't see us, Mona reminds me, and I hope to God she's right. He steps forward, unsteady like the bottom half of his body is affected with rigor mortis. Shivering violently, he reaches toward me, points. I'm frozen. I couldn't move even if I wanted to. All I can do is watch as Sam drags his finger down and over and up and down. But it isn't his own finger. It's small and broken off below the first knuckle. Holy fucking shit, Mona breathes. I shift my focus from him to the message he's just written in the frost. The letters look like meaningless symbols at first until I read them backward. I hit a body.
Wow. That sounds really cool. And very cold.
Yeah, it's very cold.
Yeah. So Black Harbor doesn't exist, but what about Forge Bridge? I noticed you focused on the bridge in your book trailers. Does that have some significance?
Yeah, I mean, the bridge is based on a bridge that I used to see all the time when I drove into work. And so it's always like every time I saw it, it's just this black railroad bridge. And it's, you know, it's almost always frozen here. So it's just this black railroad bridge stretching over, you know, this frozen river. And it just looks really ominous all the time. And I don't know, I just kind of wondered what if somebody, you know, because the main character, she goes there, you know,
Hmm.
not to jump, but she makes a habit of going to that bridge and just kind of wondering if there's sort of like an epidemic of people jumping from that bridge, like what kind of place must that be?
Oh. So as a transcriber, can you tell us, as long as it's not an open investigation, but what's the wildest story you ever had to transcribe?
I need to like start writing a list because I get asked this question and like I don't, it's so hard to come off the top of my head, but I can say like there are cases in the book that are like fictionalized, or it's like mashing up cases of like things I've experienced or heard. But yeah, he's my husband now, but when he was a detective, he used to be a detective in the drug unit, and they, you know, have confidential informants, and his confidential informant was like stabbed to death 13 times. And it was this whole big thing. They thought it was going to be like a retaliation, and it turned out, you know, she was doing other things. And that one was pretty intense, probably because it was like so close to me. But yeah, I mean, the city where I was transcribing, there was no shortage of crime or just murders. It was so fascinating to me because all this stuff happens, and like as a transcriber, like a police officer, anybody like on the inside, you have all of this knowledge of what's happening around you, and then, you know, just talking with your friends about day-to-day things, they have no idea about like the murder that happened 2 doors down.
Yeah. Speaking of your husband, I can't tell from your Instagram photos, but did you plan to get married in Hawaii, or was it just a spur of the moment thing?
Yeah, spur of the moment, kind of. I mean, yeah, we got engaged during the pandemic, and then we're, you know, planning a wedding. I'm like, I'm writing books. I don't really care about planning a wedding. Sorry. And he doesn't either. And we're like, screw this. Whatever we plan is probably going to get canceled anyway. And we were both kind of stressing out about it. Like, let's do something here. And he wanted a destination. We couldn't really make up our minds. And one day I was like doing a project and watching Moana, and I was like, hey, you want to get married in Hawaii? That looks nice. And he was like, yes, let's do it.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Well, we're almost getting to our end here. Do we have any questions, Chris, from Facebook or comments? Chris?
At the moment, no, we just have some hellos and some comments, but there are some comments in the chat that I thought were entertaining. But there's really no questions unless somebody has some questions right now. And if they type them into the chat, we can certainly ask them.
Okay. Well, let's do a quick round robin about what are you working on now and what is next for you. Alison, you're on mute though, so take it away.
I'm working on another book that should hopefully be out in winter of 23, actually. And the collective's been optioned to be a TV series by a production called Yellowbird UK that did the Wallander series, and the Millennium Trilogy, the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, so that's what's going on with me. And yeah, I'm working my next book. The working title is called The Target, but all my titles always change, so it'll be called something when it
cool beans. Isabella, what about you?
Well, I have heard from the screenwriters for, you know, the Netflix movie that they're going to make out of it. It's going to be of the first book. It's going to be a feature-length film. And no, I have not met J-Lo yet, but it's okay. But I will say this: I was teasing my husband. It's in the movie deal that I get to go to the Hollywood premiere, and I get to bring a +1. So I told him he has to be really nice to me. So because I have other takers that are willing, you know. Anyway,
no doubt.
that's still going on, and I know that's going to take a while, but I'm hoping that they're going to start shooting in 2022 next year is what my hope is. And so if that happens, I mean, right now she's shooting a different movie, so I think mine's next in the queue, but you never know. So there's that. And I just submitted, okay, so The Cipher was the first one, and then A Different Dawn is the second one that I just read from. And I just turned in the manuscript for the third book in the series called The Falcon, which is coming out in June of next year. And I'm getting ready to start another one. So, you know, it's like, you know, it just keeps going. So yeah.
Good. Catriona, what are you up to?
Yeah, I'm writing right now using NaNoWriMo as a kind of, I'm writing book 5 of that trilogy, comedy. And what else is going on? And then I've got something else coming out next spring. It's not the historical detective, and it's not the psychological suspense, and it's not a comedy. It's another thing. I thought I'd try something else. So I'm a little bit, haven't really spoken about it yet. I can speak about it right now. It's set in 1948, and it's a blue collar heroine, much more like me. I am not Dandy Gilver. Breaking news, right? So, and it's set at the birth of the NHS, like the day that the National Health Service starts in the city. So it's a medical background where in this period of great flux in my home city. I'm very excited about it. And 1948 was lovely to write about because my parents were alive and old enough to remember. So I just phone my mum and say, "Hey, mum, can you tell me, did you have bubble gum? Mum, can you tell me when did when did this happen?" So she's sick of it already, but that's what I've got going on.
Very fun. And Hannah, what are you going to be up to?
So I'm working on copy edits. I think I'm going to get those this week or next week for the second book in this series. I guess it's unofficially called the Black Harbor series. I don't know, but the second one will be called The Widowmaker. And that's about like a photographer with a dark, sordid history pairing up with a sensitive crimes detective, but they're solving a 20-year-old cold case of Black Harbor together. So that one should come out next fall. And then Hello Transcriber actually comes out at the end of this month on the 30th. And yeah, I'm working on the third one. I started the third one in this series. So trying to get that one off the ground, which would feature like a medical examiner as the main character. So, I of course had to go make friends with the medical examiner because I don't know anything about that. So she's been super helpful.
Cool. Very cool. Well, Chris has a quick round robin for everybody. What are you, a plotter or pantser? Do you outline your books or do you just write? Anybody chime in?
I'm a big honking pantser. Last Thursday, I got to the end of what I knew about this book I was writing. I got to 20,000 words, and that was the very end of what I knew. And so just, like that Wallace and Gromit film where they just lay the track in front of the little car as you're going along. That's where I am now. It's horrible. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It's awful. But yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm pretty similar too. I always feel like writing for me is like feeling my way around a dark room looking for the light switch, and then usually about 20,000 words I find the light switch. So my first draft is always just terrible, awful, and just I feel really bad for my agent, my editor, and then I do a lot of refining in the second draft.
And I would, I refer to myself as a ploncer because apparently pantser isn't a stupid enough word, so there has to be another one. So it's kind of a hybrid thing. And I'll often, I'll kind of joke that, well, of course I outline because what else would I have to deviate from? So, because I never stick to my original idea. I have this, and I do every time. I always start, and I have this, kind of but it's a very loose outline, where I just have a couple plot points I know I want to hit, and then it just deviates, So I think I still, if I'm going from New York to LA, I know I'm still going to get to LA, but I'll take a tour through Austin and another tour through, Savannah, and it goes all over the place. I never know exactly where it's going to go, but how to get there, but it does kind of get where I'm aiming it to go. That's really it.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
And Hannah?
Yeah, I always say I'm a pantser trying to be a plotter, but the first book, Hello Transcriber, totally pants that. And then Widowmaker, I got a little smarter, making like murder boards behind me. And then that's pretty much my process. But for the third one, I'm like, I'm gonna have like a legitimate outline, and I'm gonna be detailed about every chapter. And I super detailed like 36 chapters. And I'm like, this is so awesome, and I'm gonna be the best, and I'm gonna write this so fast. And I deviated from chapter 1. So
Oh,
That's very
whatever.
Okay, well, I could do this for another hour, but unfortunately we're out of time. But thank you for joining our fabulous authors for this wonderful event. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. We will be taking a hiatus in December, but check our website then for some great giveaways. And join us in January, where I'll talk with Dirk Kussler, Jacqueline Mitchard, S.J. Roseanne, and Alifair Burke. And thank you so much for all of you for being here tonight. And thank you to our 4 incredible authors. This has been really fun.
Thank you.
thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, everybody. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.